celebrating and showcasing extraordinary people who are doing incredible things to make our world a better place. This is Close-Up Television. I'm your host, Jim Masters, and thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we celebrate Jill Witte, personal trainer and the founder of True Fit Balance, where she specializes in providing personal training services for the body and the mind. Through a combination of personal training, brain health training, nutrition, and life coaching, Jill strives to help her clients become the best version of themselves by bringing body, mind, and life into harmony. Jill was inspired to create True Fit Balance because of her past experiences trying to find an exercise and nutrition program that worked for her. According to Jill, we can achieve and maintain a healthy body simply by understanding a little bit more about exercise and a little bit more about nutrition. Now, to learn more about how she works with her clients to help them achieve and maintain good health and wellness, Jill joins me in the Close-Up Television studio for this exclusive interview and an exercise demonstration. Jill, thanks for joining us. So it's great to have you here at the studio because we did the radio show, which was fantastic.
Yes, I did. I really enjoyed it when you had me on. I feel like we had that really good composure back and forth, and it was nice. I really enjoyed the interview. Thank you.
Now we can go a little bit deeper, which is what I like, and you're going to do the exercise demonstration for us as well, because that's really so crucial to what you do. But what's really fascinating for me as far as the inspiration with you is you were really on a mad search for an exercise and nutrition program that worked for you, because there's a ton of them out there.
Right.
And sometimes it's one size fits all, but you weren't looking for that, right?
No, I wasn't. I wanted finding something that worked for me, and I'm all about trying something new, trying the different exercise programs to see what works for me from that particular exercise program or nutrition program. But not all of it will work for me. And so what I was doing was, trying different things, but I was getting frustrated because I didn't understand that, I was told I had to be in a box in a way if I were to do this exercise program.
Right.
If you don't follow these rules, you'll never lose weight, you'll never do this, and that's horrible for self-esteem. It's the same thing with the nutrition programs.
Right.
It's horrible for self-esteem because if you feel like you can't accomplish what they're expecting you to accomplish, then you feel like a failure, and that's mentally hard. And so when I kept failing at these exercise programs and these nutrition programs, I felt like a failure. On top of my already low self-esteem that I had and my body image issues, it just kept destroying me to the point I was like, okay, well, I want to find what works for me.
Right.
Okay, so I realized maybe this aspect of an exercise program worked for me with how I train my biceps or something, or this part of the nutrition program that I tried worked for me where I would cut things out of my diet, right? When I found out I was lactose intolerant or dairy or even Greek yogurt bothered me, and it was things like that. So I got my personal trainer certification because I really wanted to understand how the body worked, and that's what I did. And so through my personal trainer certification, I understand how the body worked and how my body worked and what exercises worked for me. It's funny, right before COVID hit, I was lifting heavier because I wanted to see how much I could lift. But the problem was, even with proper form, I was getting my period every other week.
Wow, yeah.
And it was putting a strain on my uterus and all that stuff. And when COVID hit and I stopped lifting very hard, that all went away. And my periods went back to being on a regular schedule again. And it was just one of those things of this is how my body's reacting to what's going on with how I'm working out. It's the same thing with nutrition, right? One of the things I really liked was the blood type diet, right? Knowing what your blood type is, and what it does is it breaks it out between foods that are good for you, foods that are bad for you, and foods that are neutral for you. And it kind of gave me a sense of what foods I should cut out and really see if those foods were really bad for me, if these foods are really good for me, and these foods, or just kind of whatever. Because even some of the good foods, I still can't eat because I can't process citrus, I can't, eat a lot of raw vegetables, and so
that's based on the blood type?
So it's taking the blood type diet and what specifically works for mine, which is B, and taking those foods and seeing how it works for me. Because even some of the good foods that they were telling me to eat, I couldn't really eat because I can't process stuff that has citrus in it. I can't eat a lot of raw vegetables, and so. But the funny part is with vegetables and with fruit. Sometimes you can eat them in a raw state, or you can't eat them in a cooked state, or vice versa. You can eat them in you can eat them in the cooked state, but not the raw state. So it's it works like that. So there's some fruits and vegetables that I can eat raw, and there's some stuff that I can eat where it's cooked instead, and then I'm okay.
So it's all part of how it digests and processes
how it digests
body?
and processes. And exactly. And the funny part is everybody's body works differently and processes foods differently. And so, people will be like, oh, here, have a cookie, or here, eat this pizza. And it's like, and they think I'm going to say no because I'm so healthy, but it's like, no, it's not the reason. I can't eat the cheese off of it. The grease is going to upset my stomach, and it's this and it's that. And most people who see me who think like, oh, have a cookie or have a pastry. And it's like, no, if I eat that, I'm just going to be running to the bathroom. And so, it's that stigma that people put on also, people who are in business and who are fit and healthy and trainers. And they think, oh, I'm not going to eat that because it's unhealthy. It's like, no, I'm not going to eat it because
it's just not going to agree with you.
It's just not going to agree with me, right.
And which is amazing because a lot of us go through life just eating anything we want, figuring we can. I'll have the cookie, the pizza, I'll have the salad, I'll have, the water, but they'll have anything. You go to a gathering, you go to a restaurant, and whatever is on the menu, you just order and eat it. But then you wonder why maybe that night you had an upset stomach, or triggers acid reflux, or you felt lethargic and exhausted, and here you were eating something that maybe somebody else is getting energy from, and you're going down the other way. All of these factors come into play, and you were noticing that in your body?
Right, and I've had this since I was a child, where I'd have an upset stomach after I ate things, but I just never really took the time to analyze it. So one day I wanted to understand why food was affecting me the way it affected me. And it is funny because people will mention about how, like, oh, I ate this thing, I just felt bloated and gassy. And most people, they're coming from a restaurant, chalk it up to being like, oh, I just ate out and it's a big heavy meal and that's what it is. And it's like, no, there's something within that that's causing you to have an upset stomach. And there's also people who are like, well, I want to lose weight, and these are the things I'm eating, but it's causing me, bloated, gassy, and they still continue to eat it. It's like, well, maybe even though it's a healthy food, for you it's not a healthy food, and it's affecting you losing the weight. Because it's true, for a while I stopped eating chicken, and it was because, according to the blood type diet at the time, it said that chicken was bad for me, and I had cut it out, and I felt, it wasn't losing the weight, but I felt not like happier. I felt like less tense and things like that. And so it was an interesting process to go through. So I stopped eating chicken for a couple of years. I've since reintroduced it, but it's an interesting thing to see. How are you able to
reintroduce it? Is it processed differently? Is it different kinds of chicken? Are you preparing it differently?
So it's mostly grilled chicken, or I'll saute it. I'll cook it within its own marinade, and I'll cook it that way. I can't eat fried chicken. Anything with grease, I can't.
So the grease,
The grease really gets to me. So that's how I eat the chicken. And the funny thing is, with turkey, about 2 years ago, I stopped eating turkey right before Thanksgiving because I was noticing it was upsetting my stomach. I stopped eating turkey for about almost 2 years, and I kind of reintroduced it by eating ground turkey, and that was okay. But the actual turkey itself, even from a turkey breast they get on Thanksgiving, the enzymes in it, whatever, upset my stomach and break it down, and it's just an unpleasant feeling to where I'm almost doubled over in pain.
I have a cousin who actually went through that with turkey, or all poultry actually, would have a allergic sort of, not quite anaphylactic, but close to not being able to breathe that well from poultry.
Yes.
And it seems to, over time, have corrected itself a little bit, where he can now start to have some of it as the body changes, I guess. But many years, he'd have to have ham or something alternative on the holidays. And it's amazing how your body sort of does that, morphs into different scenarios as life goes on.
Yeah, you find that you find that something's bothering you, cutting out for at least a month, 2 months, seeing how your body feels, and then reintroducing it, and then seeing if it does it again. And then at that point, try cutting out for a year, because what you're doing now is flushing out the toxins, flushing out whatever was causing the issue for the upset stomach or whatever it was, is now completely out of your body. And sometimes just flushing it out, because sometimes we'll have too much of it, kind of resets the body a little bit. And then we're able to reintroduce it again, and maybe not have it as in large amounts as someone used to have, but still have it a little bit here and there.
So when you were on that search for the exercise and nutrition programs that work for you, who was Jill then, before you found what you needed to find?
Jill then was a very unhappy person, depressed person, but I didn't realize it at the time, because I felt like this is just who I was, right? I have dyslexia. Was never tested for it, but I know that I have it. But I didn't realize I had it as a kid. And so when I was in like 3rd grade or 2nd grade, I don't read, like I can read, I just can't process things quickly as most people can.
Right.
And so I have to reread a bunch of times. And teachers would send me out in the hallway to finish reading while they were continuing the class.
Right.
And that made me feel stupid, basically.
Yeah.
And so from that moment on, I now was ingrained with the fact that I was stupid, right? Because I don't learn how other kids learn, but no one ever taught me it's okay to learn differently.
Right.
Much like everyone's body responds differently to food and exercise, mentally we all have to process things in a certain way too.
Right.
And so, but I never knew that. So I was trying to fit myself, a square peg into a round hole. Mm-hmm. So I kept shaving sides off of myself to try to meet the norm, to try to meet what people wanted me to be, who I thought they wanted me to be. Right. So I kept putting expectations on myself of who they thought I should be. Now, whether they were actually putting those expectations on me, that's a whole different story. But I was putting those expectations on myself. Mm-hmm. And from a young age, that now became ingrained into my subconscious of like, this is who I am. Right. I'm dumb. When I would be like, why doesn't someone want to be my friend? Oh, they just don't like me. Why does when someone find me attractive? Oh, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that. And that became ingrained in me as a kid. And over the years, into adulthood, I kept doing the exact same thing. And I just kept coming back to it because that's what I knew.
Were you pulling away from people as a result? Because they're not going to hurt you anyway, so you pull away?
No, because I was actually trying to win their friendship in a way.
Win them over, yeah.
Win them over, because it's like, well, why don't I have friends? Well, if they kind of like me, even though they may have been toxic to me, I still wanted to be their friend because I had a friend. I had someone who would talk to me, and so it wasn't until I recently finally was like at the point where I was like, I want to get rid of the toxic people in my life. It's when I started to change my mindset of like, I am no longer, yes, I'm intelligent, I am smart, I am beautiful, I am this, and if someone doesn't like me for who I am, that's on them. That's not on me.
That's their hang up, right?
That's their hang up. And if they don't want to be my friend, then they don't have to be my friend.
Right, exactly.
And it's when I started to do that, it's when I started to get rid of the toxic people in my life. And I find that like I have a very small group of friends that like I talk to, and that's about it. And I don't put out myself as much as I used to anymore, and it's just...
You created boundaries.
I created boundaries.
Right.
So...
Which sometimes we don't realize we need to do.
Yes.
Because especially in the early years, you figure you got to have 150 friends.
Right.
Everybody has to like you. Why don't they like you? And then you start tearing yourself apart and saying, well, there's got to be things that, I'm doing wrong.
Right.
When it really could just be their perspective and their hang up.
Right.
And then you realize that over time that you need to live your authentic life.
Exactly.
To really be able to offer the best of you to the world.
100%.
And also to please yourself as well.
Right.
And to be content with yourself. And that takes time and wisdom and experience and life lessons that you've obviously picked up early. So that was Jill at that point. And then what triggered the aha moment where you said, enough is enough? I need to make some monumental life changes.
So about 6 years ago, I had just had my daughter. So she was about a year, had very bad postpartum depression. I didn't know who I was because I had so many expectations. We're taking on so many expectations of other people that I lost who I was, right? Again, going back to square peg, round hole, I shaved so much off of myself to try to fit in the norm, I lost who I was. Yeah. And I also realized at that moment that I was gay. And so I wanted to, but I was like, what's going on? Like I was so frustrated.
That's a whole other element in
and
all of this.
And all of this going on. And it bubbled to the point of where I wanted to kill myself. And that I wanted to, had a plan of action and everything. And then my daughter kind of like...
Were you able to reach out? Did you reach out to people?
No.
Or did you figure, well, they already think this about me already. This will just tip it over?
Right. It was one of those things of where I felt so depressed and so like no one, again, going back to ingraining myself with negative thoughts, it was ingraining myself with, well, no one cares no one will care if I die. No one will care if I lived or died. I'm just another blip, and people will go on with their lives, and this will not affect anybody.
Now, were you a teen when this was happening?
No, this was 6 years ago.
I'm
41 years old now.
So you've gone through this and have dealt with this internally.
Yes.
For a good long time.
For a good long time. I was like this for 35 years, and it boiled to a point of where.
What did you feel like nobody was listening, or nobody had time to listen? See, family, friends, others.
So here's the other part of it too, and I think this is what a lot of people feel as well, is that we don't want to bother our friends and family with our problems.
And sometimes they also have expectations of who you are that they've set.
Right.
And that you can never change or alter or be anything other than what they feel you already are when you were a kid.
Right, exactly. And so I'm very good about people coming to me and talking to me, and I'm all about listening to their problems and helping them out. It's one of the reasons why I got my life coach certification as well, because I'm good that way.
Enjoy it, yeah.
But I have a hard time talking to people because I didn't want to burden those people. They already had enough going on with their lives. I didn't want to burden people with my own problems. So I internalized everything and internalized
Try
it.
to handle it yourself.
Right, and try to figure it out on my own. And I'm very much one of trying to figure out stuff on my own. I'm a very quizzical person, and so
Did you find that if you reached out for help, it would be looked at as a sign of weakness,
to myself.
Vulnerability, right?
Weakness and vulnerability to myself.
Right.
Because
so not to others thinking that you're vulnerable and weak, but yourself.
I put the expectation on that I didn't want other people to look at me as being weak and vulnerable because I had the reputation of having this very hard exterior to a certain point. I carry myself a certain way, confidence, and so people,
assured and confident, right?
Right, and so people, I didn't want people to see the weakness. I didn't want to see the chink in the armor, as it were, and because I didn't want to show that I had weakness. I didn't want to show people my vulnerability because I didn't want to be taken down in a way.
Does that go all the way back to
the
childhood, dyslexia, that whole thing?
Everything.
That was building up, this shield of armor of protection was building up.
Yep. Yeah. I didn't want to get hurt, and so I just built up myself in this negative way and put myself into this little cocoon, internalized, and on the outside I was this what would seem like maybe a happy-go-lucky kid or a person.
Taken care of. Yeah, you're all your ducks in a row. Everything's good.
Yep, I'll help everybody else. Everything is good. I'm great. And then the second that I'm alone, it was forget about it.
It was Jill, right?
Yeah, and I didn't want to deal with the demons in my head, as it were.
Sure.
I would turn to music to try to drown out my thoughts, and I would turn to do other things to try to not live in my head, as it were.
Right.
And so
white noise.
White noise, essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
And to the
works
point,
for a while, and then even that doesn't do the trick.
It's a good point because we find avenues, ways of trying to do a white noise or another way,
numbing.
But after a while, it doesn't work.
Because then you feel like you're fooling yourself.
You're full of yourself, but also that you've become desensitized to it because you use it so much. Exactly. When you use something over and over again so much, it doesn't really work anymore because you use it too often.
Right.
So it's trying to find avenues then to compensate for it.
So was the wanting to commit suicide the pivotal thing that pushed you to want to make this major life change, exercise, nutrition, and really start thinking about Jill, or were there other things that are happening before or after that very monumental period? And also, how did you, were there people that rushed in to help you, or was it something you got through to not go through with that?
So I decided not to kill myself because I have a daughter, and I wanted her to not live in a world that, in mental head, me, myself, without her mother, but also to teach her that to be self-confident, to love herself for who she is, and to put that in as a young kid and drill it into her head basically of you are who you are, you love who you are, and don't let anyone try to change you because you are the person that you are.
So what you didn't receive, you wanted to make sure she got.
Right. And there were people telling me, but it's whether or not I believed it. Because that's the biggest part of it. It's whether or not someone who is in that hard of a mental state and that deep down depression, whether or not, people could tell me all the time, you're a great person, you're good at this, you're good at that, but I had to believe it.
It had to be something. Do you think that you're the type of person, because sometimes it's what we need to have happen to make that radical change for the positive in our lives, is you needed to come up against that wall, that almost over the cliff moment to be able to then say, wait a minute, it's almost like a wake-up call in a way.
Yes.
Did you find that had to be...
Weirdly enough, I didn't have that aha wake-up moment, right? And I was hoping for it, and I was expecting it. And the weird part is, around that time, I had a really bad car accident, right? I was driving behind a pickup truck that had a landscaping trailer with a fender that was blowing off, and I was like, hey, I should move over because this is bad. And as soon as I thought that, off it came, smashed my windshield, and I went into the divider. I was completely fine, but I was like, man, this is going to be my aha moment. I just had a car accident, and it wasn't. And for me, it wasn't just one moment. It wasn't just one thing. It was several little aha things that helped me get to where I was. And I kind of had to, I have a tattoo on my back. It says, it's always darkest before the dawn. And that was the lowest part of my life, right? And I built myself up from there, and I'll fall again, and I'll build myself up again, and I'll fall again, but I will never reach this point down here of where I was. So it's one of the reminders that I have. And so going back a little bit to what you're saying, I got my personal trainer certification and my nutrition certification right around the time that I was going through all this heavy stuff for myself, wanting to think about committing suicide and all that stuff. So that's when all that started to change. I changed mentally to a more positive mindset thinking right around COVID, okay? And to go back to something that you were saying earlier about how friends, and you want about 150 friends, but now let's think social media, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Instagram. Everyone wants those 150 plus millions of friends on their Instagram page, and want all these hearts and all these likes, but
perfectly filtered pictures that don't look anything like the person.
Right, exactly. And so I ended up deleting my personal social media accounts because it became too toxic for me. And I spent most of COVID because I wasn't working. I was on unemployment like most people were in the beginning stages of it. And I would travel upstate New York to Saratoga, Lake George area, and I like hiking. Yeah. And that's where a lot of my mental breakthrough started to happen. So, everything happened to a point. About 2020 is when I really decided to really make the mental breakthrough, mental change, because I was tired. I told myself in a moment, I'm like, I'm no longer living in the past. What has happened has happened. It's made me who I am. I don't regret any of it. That was my life I had. It's made me who I am to this moment.
It's amazing the power of nature, huh? The power of getting away from the busyness of city and people and noise and going into a place larger than yourself, like the mountains or the ocean or the desert, and handing the control over to it, and then whatever comes out of it for you is really life-changing. It sounds like while you're going up to the Adirondacks and up through Saratoga, that energy that was there, you soaked up and needed badly. Yeah, I did. And I remember my 40th birthday hike that I did up there. And again, up to that point, I've been a lot better. But this particular hike stuck in my head because it was a nice sunny day. It started out. I'm going up the mountain, and it turned to rain. And I just remember, it wasn't a heavy rain, but it was still a rain, and like a light rain. And I remember as soon as it turned to rain, my thoughts turned negative. And there's this, an idea behind when rain comes in, the negativeness comes in with it. Right. And I remember for the majority of that hike, I was working through these issues that I was having. And then when I came back down the other side of the mountain, the sun started to come up and everything was clear again. And it's amazing how the power of again, like you're saying, nature and the rain coming in and cleansing away the negative thoughts that I had and all that. You needed to. It's funny that you say the mountain because it was like your own mountain. Exactly. You needed to go up to reach the top of that, make it to the top of the mountain, and then be able to descend with a different way of thinking. Right. So it's funny how the analogy of the mountain for you was so crucial. Yes, exactly. It's hitting the peak, hitting the top, seeing Lake George as it was, because that's where it was around there, and then just coming back down again. And it's funny too, because another hike I did that I'd like to mention was the first time I did this 12-mile hike. And again, rains were supposed to come in. This one was torrential downpour and lightning, thunder. And I looked at the weather, and I had timed it to the point where I would be on the back half of the mountain when it came in. But when I went up the first part, I had missed the turn. And it took me an additional 40 minutes to find where I had to make the turn. And so by the time I hit the traverse, which was the hardest part, that's when the thunder and the lightning came in. And I told myself at that moment, well, I could sit here and wait it out,
but I have to keep pushing forward. And I saw that as a metaphor for my life of like, here comes this thunder, here comes this downpour of rain. But you know what? If I don't keep pushing through the negative, or I don't keep pushing through the rain, I'm never going to get to the end of where I'll be happy. And I continued through it all. And then again, when I came back down the half of the mountain where I thought I'd be in rain, the sun had come out. And so again, I was, in this state of like, what just happened? Like I literally felt like I had gone through a battle, but that's what life is. That's what a journey is. A journey is going through the battles and then achieving them and then going through the next battle that we have to go through.
Cue the music in your car, Diana Ross, I made it through the rain.
Right, exactly.
Right. That's really cool that happened and that you're sharing this story, because there might be people watching right now who are going through a lot of what you're saying in a similar way, maybe not exact, but in a similar way, and they can relate to what you're saying. But it also makes you very relatable to your clients.
Yes.
You've been through a lot of different things in life, so when they describe and open up to you different elements of their life that maybe they don't even share with others. They don't share it with their closest loved ones or friends, but they feel safe and comfortable with you to open up and share. That's a crucial thing. That's where I think the relatability comes in, which is unique for what you offer your clients, right?
Exactly. I offer that relatability. I offer that idea of like, let's find what works for your body. And I've had clients who are like, oh, I thought we were just going to work the large muscle groups. And it's like, no, we have little muscle groups in our body and where everything is connected. And if we don't work the little muscle groups, then our body becomes imbalanced.
Right.
It's kind of like life. Right. If we don't work on the little things in our life becomes imbalanced because we're not working on every aspect of our life.
Which is important.
Which is very important. And, when I see my clients with frustration about nutrition, I'm like, you know what? It's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to have that snack, that food that you love, and just eat it, but knowing that you're just going to eat it in that moment, and that you're not going to eat it the next couple days, and that you're not going to take an entire bag of potato chips, say, if that's what it is. You're going to take some chips, put it in a bowl, and tell your brain, you know what, this is enough to help me get through. And then it helps you get through, and you don't want to go back because you've already trained your brain to say, hey, this is enough for me. And that's also what I do, is training the brain, is connecting what our body's doing to our brain, which is when we go do a demonstration later, I'm going to show you how connecting the brain to our body can help us, in the long run in life and everything.
Does it depend on the kind of potato chips, or?
Like I said, again, I go back.
Barbecue ones are pretty good.
Yeah, I go back to the whole thing of people think, I eat so healthy.
Yeah.
I went and I can't eat chocolate chip cookies. I can occasionally. I don't eat them very often. But
is it the chocolate or what's in the?
It depends on the cookie and how it's made.
Yeah.
And how much sugar is in the cookie, because this is the sugar that's ultimately what's going to get me.
Yeah. All of us should cut back on sugar anyway.
Yes.
It's not good.
But it was one of those things of like, it's a comfort thing of like being maybe a little nervous about coming in here today to do this with you. And I had a little bit of a comfort food, but I know what? I'm not going to have another comfort food because I had it. Have? It was just I went to Panera and I had like a chocolate chip cookie. I had dinner, but it was
and soft.
Yeah, it was enough. It's satisfied. It was good.
Yeah, it was just a little treat, right. But because you knew that there was a limit. The one for the flavor and the taste and satisfaction, but not 5 of them.
Right. And it's when people also have a hard time, something bad, tragic happens, and I understand certain tragedies.
Go to food and
they go to food, but they also go to a negative mindset as well. Mm-hmm. And again, depending on the tragedy, death and all that stuff, it takes a while to come out of that 100%. Right. But the longer we stay in that mindset, the harder it is to come out of it, right? And even if it's just a little step moving forward every day to more of a positive and more of, getting over is the wrong word for it, but like moving forward.
Right.
It's easier to get out of and not be in that depressed, anxious state.
Because when you do change your nutrition for the better and you exercise, there are physical things that happen, and there's internal things that happen too. The mind, body, and spirit are altered in such an incredible way.
They are.
Suddenly you get that energy, suddenly you get that zest for life, that maybe that flame that's sort of dwindled, and you're wondering, you're trying to eat all these different things and trying to do all these different things, and none of it's working.
Right.
And then when you make these changes, all of a sudden it is like a new light bulb moment for you, because you're like, wow, this is
what I needed to do. But as you're exercising, as you're eating well, there are things internally that are changing within you for the better.
Yes, there are 100%. Exercising is, it gives you a healthy. It's weird because you want to say healthy, and I feel like there's people out there who hear the word healthy and it deters them.
They're like, the other way.
They run the other way. It just makes you feel better, right? Walking makes you feel better, even if it's just a little bit of walking. There's people I have my cancer exercise certification, I have my clinical health certification, just I can help with people with chronic diseases, chronic injuries, and sometimes people feel like they can't come back from that because they have these chronic, a stigma's put on them, but exercising, when you find out you have cancer, going into treatments and all that can help during treatments. If you're able to exercise during treatments, great. If not, again, there's an understanding, obviously, that the body becomes weak and all that. Right. And then once you come out of it, and you can now then exercise once your treatments are done, and then recovery happens. And as you're able to do, and your doctor clears you. And the same thing with chronic injury. I've seen it where people are like, well, I have back problems, so I'm not going to exercise this. Well, what kind of back problem do you have? What kind of, what injury did you have? What happened here? And so I ask my clients all these questions because it's like, okay, well, maybe you can't do the exercise this way, but I know how a different way we can get you to do the exercise. And that's one of the things is like, I know many different ways to do exercises, and there's not just one set in stone. Exactly. There's different ways to do everything. Same thing with nutrition. There's not just one set thing in stone that we have to follow. It's, finding what works. But the biggest part of it all is patience.
I was going to say, you must be intuitive, because that's what I was going to ask you about. Patience is really important, right? You have to be patient with yourself.
Right. And that's a big lesson I had to learn too, because I didn't have a lot of patience when I initially started all this stuff. Again, dieting I don't like the word dieting, okay? We're going to use the words, it's journey or lifestyle change. But I don't like dieting because for me, that means you have a start date and an end date. You want to lose it for an event, you want to lose it for something, you lose the weight, and then most people end up putting the weight back on, if not more. Right. And so losing weight really quickly isn't always the best. I understand that people want to do it, and if they're able to keep the weight off, amazing, but it's hard to keep it off once you've lost the initial weight and go back to kind of your old eating habits. And so it's having the patience of being like, okay, this food doesn't work for me. Okay, I'm going to take it out. I'm going to wait the 2 months. I know that seems like it's a long time, and then I'll try reintroducing it. Or this exercise, people they'll come to me and be like, okay, I want to lose the fat around my belly. Okay, well, how are you eating? Oh, I eat healthy, but they don't really tell me what they're eating, so I can't really help them in that sense. You know what I mean? Oh, and then after like 5 sessions, be like, well, why haven't I lost any belly fat? Okay, well, you meet me with one, it's like meeting once a week, and it's like, well, what are you doing at home on top of what we're doing? Oh, nothing. Okay, so it's, again, when people are ready to make that lifestyle change, to make a life change in general, no matter what it is, the person has to be ready to do it and have the patience to do it too.
Mindset is important with all of this too, right? We're talking about patience, we're talking about the exercise and nutrition itself, but how do you shift, and how did you shift into that mindset that lent itself to accepting all of this and learning about it and then applying it to your own life?
It was one of the things, again, because I'm very curious about how everything works. And so my mindset was, I'm determined to learn how my body works. I'm determined to learn how exercises affect not only me, but other people, and what I can do. And so when I'm wanting to do something, my mind goes to and understands, again, I have to have patience to do it all, but it's that, like, okay, let's do it, which is very hard to get my personal training certification, on a side note, because I have my dyslexia, and because it's a lot of very technical terms for the muscles and everything. And so I was like, oh man, this is going to be hard. And when I took my test, I was very surprised. I was like, I passed. And it was just an amazing feeling that with all these technical terms, my dyslexia, and I was able to overcome all this stuff, that I was able to do it. Same thing with the nutrition. I want to learn how this little food can affect one person one way, affect me this way, how it affects the body totally, maybe help lose fat, gain weight, whatever. And just learning all that is, the mindset of okay, now we're done with this, now I want to do that. And then it became more of okay, now who do I want to help, right? I can help everybody, and I want to help everybody because I take all my certifications and help everybody, but I was finding, like, again, the senior population, people who had diseases or illnesses or chronic injuries, who I see them go to the gym and not knowing really what to do, and then they re-injure themselves.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be that person that they can come to and be like, okay, let's take what you did in physical therapy, let's apply it here, and let's move you forward. And I'm going to ask you like 6,000 questions every single minute of like, okay, does this hurt? Where are you feeling it? You know, making sure that you're okay so that you can have a healthy body.
Which is really important. When you created True Fit Balance, what was your vision, your mission, your hope that in terms of what you would be bringing to your clients to really help them sort of achieve these goals and get on that right path for health and wellness for themselves?
Yeah, it was to create a happy, healthy body, balanced body, healthy. That's where the balance comes in, because we have to have a balanced body. And so it's finding the right exercise tailored to that person, and as our bodies grow and change, it's finding the right nutrition for that person and changing it, again, as their body changes, and mindset. Yeah. And about how our mindset needs to change and to look more positively, I think positively about ourselves, and help a person through that, and to create that total package of connecting the brain and the body together to create a healthy, balanced body.
How does it work in the beginning when you first connect with your clients? Do you do an initial assessment? How do you work it in the beginning?
So usually what I do is I take them through some basic exercises, which is bicep curl, tricep extension, squats, and all that stuff. And I watch them and what they're doing, obviously to make sure the exercise is being done correctly, but I'm also watching their face and seeing how their face reacts, and then seeing how their reaction is after they're finished. And because if they're, I can see they're energized into it and they're like, okay, let's keep going, but then some of them kind of like get a little frustrated, because if you're lifting to, say, like a bicep curl, and you're lifting too heavy, the back gets thrown into it all, and also you feel it more in your forearm than you do your bicep. And I ask them those questions, and then they have to go down in weight, because if it's too much weight, I want to make sure you're hitting the bicep, not these other parts, and hurting themselves. And I can see the frustration on their face, because they want to be strong. They want to be stronger than the other person. And so there's frustration, and I tell them, look, we're going to build up to it. It's okay. And then over time, as they build up to it, and they're like, man, I've gotten stronger. I can feel like I'm stronger at home. People who are losing weight with me, they're like, man, this shirt that was too tight, now it's too loose. You know, I work with some of the men that I work with, like, oh, the suit jacket was like too tight. Now I could button the buttons on it. Yeah. And it's seeing like the achievements on them and hearing their achievements. It's amazing.
It's very inspiring too. I'm sure there's a lot of inspiration that's happening during all this process, that they're able to take that and it sort of improves other areas of their life, including maybe relationships. Yeah,
too, definitely. It's, you know, it's one of those, when you're losing weight, it's hard, right? Because you have to have support at home too. And it's nice when they have the support at home, and occasionally, you know, sometimes it's hard that way. Maybe there isn't so much, and like the food that this person's trying not to eat could be there.
They're always making it and cooking it. Oh, sit down and eat, and it's big meals and gravies and all this stuff.
Right, and it's so being there for my clients that they can talk to me about it all, and I'll be like, you're doing good. Just remember, and I'm like, you can have some of it, but maybe take a smaller plate. Don't take a bigger dinner plate. Maybe take like a smaller plate and put that portion size on there. So now your portion size all of a sudden becomes smaller, and now you're telling your brain, this is enough for me, right? And it's helping my clients, like, yes, you're gonna have situations like that where people are always gonna be like, oh, eat this, eat that, it's okay. And helping them to overcome those situations and how to get through it.
And also, depending on it, when, like you say, we are upset, when we are worried or we're nervous or there's been a loss, we tend to turn to food. Some people turn to alcohol, other things, sweets, whatever, to sort of numb and get through that, and to find other ways to not use those things to numb the loss, the sadness, the confusion, the frustration, the anger, whatever it is.
Yeah, I turned to exercise a lot. Okay, it was my therapy for a very, very, very long time. Exercise was my therapy, and where I would just go to the gym and I would work, or I'd go outside and I'd run till my brain couldn't think anymore. I tired myself out so I couldn't think. And a lot of people use gym as their therapy. They use it to go work out. And on an interesting side note, when COVID hit, you know, and gyms closed, and a lot of people lost their therapy with that. And so it became hard for other people to figure out what they were going to do. These, guys who go to the gym and lift heavy and, bodybuilders and all that, they now had to get stuff for their house or figure out different ways to do it.
Home gyms and things,
Home gyms and things. And, even the recreational gym goer, same thing. It was a way for people to get out of the house, go socialize, because you had, group fitness classes and all that stuff. People would go and they would socialize and be with other people, and now all of a sudden we didn't have all that.
Right.
So it's again, where therapy in that sense, everyone uses it for, not everyone, a lot of people use it for therapy, now it was taken away, and so was trying to now find what worked for them again, and finding new ways to find a therapy or find an outlet, as it were, because our outlets, I feel like, are always changing.
What about these home DVD, exercise programs, or doing things on Zoom, or is that effective? Those things effective too, or do you really have to be there hands-on?
No, you could do the home stuff is good too, because it reaches people who are intimidated maybe to go into a gym, or who don't have time to go into a gym, and it helps, and it's helpful because people are getting active, so it's good that way. Yes.
You're big on the mind-body connection too,
Yes.
and the importance of really understanding and appreciating that. Tell us about the importance of the mind-body connection.
So the importance of the mind-body connection is because how we do stuff with our body, we can ingrain it into our brain. And we go out somewhere on the street or something, and all of a sudden that thing that we ingrained into our brain, whether it was an exercise, all of a sudden now we can use out in the real world, and it prevents us from getting injured, right? And so it's a lot of, one exercise that I do is kind of like a shuffle back and forth, and the person stops. We shuffle, you stop on your foot, and you kind of pick one foot up. And what that does is to see what's going to happen if you're going to fall this way, right? So when that happens, as you start to go, now you can correct yourself, right, and come back. But now what you're doing is training the muscles in your ankle, right, to be like, okay, this is what happens when my foot stops really quick. And when you're out in the real world, and sometimes when we come across somebody and you kind of do that shuffle back and forth, right? You're going to go this way, I'm going to go that way. People can roll their ankle because all of a sudden they hit too hard and they roll their body. So it's connecting how the body's doing a movement to what the brain, to ingrain it in the brain, so that somewhere down the line, you can now apply it somewhere else if you need to. So I'm just going to show you guys a couple of quick demos of some things in terms of brain-body connection. But really quick, before I do that, I just want to show you the back of my shirt. It says, I believe in myself, right? This was my mantra. This is what I've had to tell myself in the beginning. This is one of the first manifestations, the first good things I had to do, was tell myself that I believe in myself. And that's one of the most important things to do, is believe in yourself, because if you don't believe in yourself, the rest of it is harder down the line. So believe in yourself, and that's why I wear it on my back, is because I have to remind myself sometimes to even believe in myself. Even after, years of doing it, I still have the reminder of believing in myself. All right? So believe in yourself. Okay, so what I'm going to do today, I'm going to show you two exercises. One exercise we're going to start with, I'm going to do a squat. And this is more because I'm a brain health trainer. This is to show a cognitive decline that we have over the years. It's mostly with seniors, older people, but we also have it. Even as a younger generation, people in our 40s, cognitive decline is brought on by being tired, stress and all that type thing, which is what we do have, in our daily lives when we are busy with work, busy with family, and just everything. And so this kind of helps train the brain, move the brain to think differently, okay? So I'm going to count down. Usually I would count up with my clients, go from 1 to 12 for the exercise, for a squat. But I'm going to count down in this case, and I'm going to subtract by 2s because I'm going to make it easy for myself because I'm on camera. So we're going to subtract by 2, but you can also subtract by 3s, 4s, 5, 6, whatever the number is. Start at the top and then work your way down. So 12, 10, 8, there it goes, 6, 4, 2, okay? That's the easy way that's one of the easier ways to do it. But challenge yourself a little bit more and count down, subtracting by a different number. And if you want, go up and add a different number, whether it's 4, 6, 5, whatever it may be. This way you train your brain to be constantly moving. And also, Because sometimes when we work out, sometimes we just get into a state where we're just going up and down, up and down, up and down. We're thinking about different things. This forces our brain to think and concentrate on the exercise as well. Okay? The other thing I wanted to show is how exercise and movement can help us with our everyday lives. Okay, I referenced in my interview with Jim about how when you kind of do a shuffle to the side, stop, and see what happens with your ankle, okay? So I'm going to show that really quick. So you kind of move to one side and you stop on your foot and see what your ankle does. I'm going to show you again. Stop, right? My ankle starts to do this. It goes one side to the other, right? Now my brain is learning that when I stop, I now know how to correct myself and help myself stand up. That when I stop on this foot, my ankle's going to go out, so now I need to learn how to shift my body to bring myself upright to find center again. Go back the other way. Stop, okay? I'm a little bit stronger on my right side, on my left side, I mean, and I didn't have as much of a wobble. Again, back and forth. And doing this motion over and over again trains the brain that when you're in a situation that someone's coming towards you, you're going towards them, and you do that little shuffle back and forth as to who's going to go which way. You stop, and instead of rolling your ankle, you can now correct yourself and be like, all right, now I'm going to stop, the other person can pass, and you can continue walking. And now you haven't sprained your ankle, broken an ankle, fallen down, or broken anything else. And it just, little things, exercises like that can help prevent, any falls in our daily lives. So. An example of that is also how I was running. It was like a couple years ago, 3-4 years ago. It was like March. And so the ground was really soft. So I was running on a sidewalk. I saw a woman in front of me and went to go around her on the grass. My foot sunk into the mud. And I could about feel my knee about to go, but then my brain was like, hey, wait a minute, we're kind of squatting down to like you do with like a squat. So I pushed myself back up and I dislodged my foot from the grass and I kept running. But my brain was like, hey, we've done an exercise similar to this before, let's use it. I used it.
Oh, that kicked in, yeah.
And that kicked in, and that's when I used that.
That's important, huh? To really realize the opportunities as they're sometimes presented in front of you, literally split right in the second there, and you have to.
Right.
That's great.
And that was it within with like maybe 2, 3, 4 seconds that all that transpired. But if I hadn't done the exercise, my brain would not have known, and ingraining in my brain that time of being like, okay, we need to squeeze our glutes, quads, hamstrings to push ourselves back up. When the incident happened, I did all that, and I dislodged my foot, and I prevented injury.
That's really, really cool. You mentioned early on the understanding of dyslexia as a kid. How did you make it actually work for you?
So, I had to make dyslexia work for me. And as a kid, it was a little harder. I mean, I got B's and C's and things like that. But I kind of got the gist of what I was reading. I would skip over words, and because how I read is I will read a sentence, and then I insert a word that I think should be there, and that's not. And I will read the sentence over and over again and still continue to do the same thing. And so I've had to teach myself to stop and slow down. Because at the time your brain's racing and you're trying to get through the reading, because at the time I didn't want to be the last kid to finish reading. So now I'm skimming through everything, and then I kind of got the gist of things.
What's probably amazing too is that I would imagine that almost like if you were a proofreader at a newspaper, there probably are some times where the word that you're trying to insert into that sentence actually makes sense.
Right.
And that word should really be there.
Right. Yes, exactly. And so, so over time I just learned to be like, okay, I had to train my brain to slow down.
Right.
And this is what I tell a lot of my clients too, is teaching yourself to slow down.
Breathe. Calm and right.
Which is because when we get into certain situations where our body gets super tense and
flight or fight,
exactly. Yes, flight does happen, and that's fine, and it does have to happen. But sometimes, if it's a situation where there is no flight and we have to have the confrontation with somebody or a situation, it's calming ourselves down to be in a clear of mind to do it. And I have
you're more effective that way too.
More effective that way.
When you're calm, you can be more effective, more resilient, and almost get done what needs to get done when you're not flipping out.
Yes. I have a tattoo on my arm. It's Winnie the Pooh and Piglet, and it has two meanings. The first meaning,
the Tao of Pooh.
The Tao of Pooh.
Yes.
Yes. There's a book, and it's about the Tao and explained through Winnie the Pooh.
Right.
And Winnie the Pooh is considered an uncarved block of wood, right? It is Pooh looks at the world as he sees the world, where Rabbit and Tigger and all their friends, their personalities come into play. So they come across a situation of and their all personalities try to come and fix the problem, right? But it becomes more difficult because we're trying to force our personalities onto something and make it more difficult, where Pooh just comes up and be like, well, you just got to do this, and it's a simpler way of doing it. So it's a reminder of ourselves that we have to be an uncarved block of wood sometimes and just look at life more simply.
It's really amazing because you referenced Winnie the Pooh. A lot of those types of characters had these messages. As kids, you watch them just because they're animations, they're fun, but there were a lot of great, valuable messages in that you could actually, adults can learn from now.
Exactly. I'll watch cartoons with my daughter and I'll be like, wow, that's
what they meant.
That's what they meant, right? Because at the time you're just looking at it, especially when we're 2 or 3, we're just looking at for the bouncy characters and the bright colors, and then there's real message behind everything.
You talked about also, which I know about even with myself, you talked about expectations.
Yeah.
And there are 2 sets. There's the set that you create for yourself,
yes,
which you mentioned is something that you've always been working through, is the expectations you set, your standards, which are high.
Yes.
You demand a lot of yourself.
Yes.
But then there's the other set, which is the general public, or it could be the family, the friends, the colleagues, the people that know you, and then the people that don't know you well, but maybe know of you.
Sure.
And they have their set of expectations of who Jill should be.
Right.
And how you should live and how you should respond and what you should do with your life.
Right.
Tell us about the dealing with the 2 sets of expectations, the self-created as well as the dangers of following everybody else's expectations.
Right. So obviously I'm a lot better now about expectations, and it's funny because I do my daily gratitudes every day, and one of them is I'm grateful that I meet my expectations, right? And this is something I've had to do a lot, within the last year or so, is constantly remind myself we are meeting our own expectations. And when I feel like other people's expectations, they put them on me and what they expect of me, I see what they want. I will maybe cater to some or work with what their expectations are, but I won't let them consume me.
What would be one expectation that you find is a running thread in your life that people always have expected from Jill?
One of the things, it's a good question. Trying to think. So probably it would be, it's a hard question to think about, because I think
several to choose from.
There's probably several to choose from. There really is.
That you're always going to be there for them and run for them.
I will always do everything. I will be there for them, but a lot of it is I will get it done. I think that's the biggest one, especially with previous work that I've used to have. It was oh, Jill, she'll handle it. It's fine. Okay, but maybe I'm not going to handle it the way you want me to handle it, or I'm not going to. Maybe I don't feel like handling it today, but I have to handle it in the situation. But as being that go-to person of oh, Jill's got it, and it's I'm kind of
could
done
use a few other people or a team.
Right, I can't do everything by myself.
Right.
And so, yeah.
So in a way, people, when they realize that, they can take advantage.
Oh yeah.
They're like, oh, just we're out of here, 5 o'clock, we're done. Give it to Jill. She'll be here till midnight, making sure it's done, which will make us all look good.
Right.
And you probably have reached a point where you're like, not so much.
Not so much anymore. Yeah. And I used to be that way because I wanted to meet their expectations. I didn't want to disappoint, right? That's a big thing. It's not disappointing, right? There's meeting expectations and not wanting to be a disappointment.
Right.
Which is, again, what I told myself and graded myself as a kid, that you're a disappointment. And so I never wanted to be a disappointment. I wanted people to rely on me. which is fine, and I've done all that. But like now it's like, no, you guys are going home at 5 o'clock, so am I. And if you want to finish this, then we all stay together and we'll finish it. So.
Were you nervous to do that in the beginning? Were you like, oh, gee, if I do that, they're all going to go away, or they're not going to have me around anymore? Was that fear factor of if you created those boundaries, which are healthy, and it's a good thing you did, that somehow they'd be resistant or it would create more problems for you?
There was anxiety behind it.
About that.
Right. I don't know so much about fear. I kind of feel like fear and anxiety are two separate things.
They run neck and neck.
Neck and neck. They're very similar, but it's more of the anxiety of like, oh my God, no one's going to depend on me ever again and all this stuff. But it's like, no, I have to have, my well-being. I need to, my health, I'm not going to stress myself out because it's someone else's project that needs to get done and they're relying on me to finish it for them, even though they're leaving. It's like, no, if this project means something to this person, then they will be there as well with me trying to help me do it. And so.
When you, and again, this ties to the expectations.
Yeah.
When you were at that point of potential suicide, and ending Jill's life, even though Jill had so much more to give, you mentioned thinking about the fact that you have a daughter, and you didn't want her to live without a mother, which is thinking about your daughter, which is a beautiful thing to do. But what did you call upon to think about Jill, so Jill would continue? Because
it's like in a way, I guess maybe in a sense that it was a slow awakening coming to that point, because I know we had talked about this before where I didn't have one pivotal moment.
But this might have been.
But it probably was maybe a little bit of a pivotal moment in that sense, because it was fueled by my daughter and wanting her to, be happy and all that stuff. But deep down, it was me wanting to, but I didn't call it that. I called it wanting to be there for my daughter, when it really was me wanting to show other people that they too can come back from something. Mm-hmm. And I was a fighter, and I got, I'm a fighter, and I went to the darkest places, and I've managed to come out, and it was me wanting to help other people do the same thing.
When you were thinking about doing that, did your family, friends, were they aware of it either during, or did they learn about it after?
A lot of it was
came
after.
To that point? So what was their reaction to you, and what, were they like, oh, we love you, we want to remind you that we love you, you're important to us, reach out to us anytime you need to? Was there this comfort that...
Yes, there was a comfort, definitely. They were very supportive. They were supportive, and like, we're here for you if you need anything.
We didn't realize, because we always thought you were the can-do, go-to person.
Right.
We didn't know that you needed and could have had some struggle.
Right, and it's interesting. A lot of, not everybody, but a lot of people who do commit suicide, you don't realize, you're like, really, that person committed suicide? Yeah, and it's because people don't really know what's on the inside of that person,
I had
and
a friend that did, and an uncle. And a cousin.
Yeah, and they show you, they only want to show you the good. They don't want to show you the bad, because again, it's a burden thing. And
exactly. I can look at each of them and say they were the type to not want to burden anybody.
Right.
And held it in.
Yes.
And then everybody's shocked, because they're like, wow, there were no signs. What was well, internally.
There were.
And then maybe if people, which is another thing I'm always big about, maybe if people took the time to really stop and say, you know what, I'm going to go check in on that person. I want to go see how they're doing.
Right.
I want to offer up, you know what I mean? The thing is, you're the doer. Right. You're checking in on everybody else. Right. You were running for everybody else and caring for everybody else, so everybody else assumed you're good.
Right.
She's all right. She doesn't feel pain. She doesn't, hurt.
Right.
And if she did, she'll fix it.
Right.
Not realize, but it's always good to take a moment to, even if somebody looks like they got everything lined up perfectly, nobody does. Nobody has everything lined up perfectly.
No, they don't.
And then, we all have things we go through in our lives, so check in
and the hard part too is, especially knowing from my experience, is that, even when people do check in and, initially when people are like, oh my God, we're here for you, whatever you need, as a person, it's still hard, and going through it all, it's still like, yeah, okay, whatever. You know what I mean? Right. I still had that attitude of like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever. Like,
do they really mean it? Or
right, and I knew they did, but like, I guess deep down I knew they did, but at the time it was just like, oh, you're just saying that type
just because
thing.
it's the thing to say to make you feel good.
Right.
Right.
And I think, it's one of those hard parts because we want to comfort people, right, when they're going through things, and we're like, or like someone's going through something and someone will say, oh, it's not as bad as what this person's going through. And that takes away from the other person's feelings, because you're like, oh yeah, I guess you're right, but yet that person still feels bad about what they're going through. And so when someone said, it's out of heartfelt meaning, it's out of heartfelt, saying, I want to be here for you, but they don't know what else to say. It's being like, oh, again, you're going through this, someone else is going through something harder.
Yeah.
It's not really the best thing always to say, because it makes the other person feel worse, because then
Right.
they actually took the time to express their feelings to you, and now you're shooting them down and being like, oh, it's not that bad because this other person's going through something else. And now that person feels even worse about coming out and expressing their feelings. Now they feel like even more of a burden. Now they're going to come in and like be in that more themselves.
Or sometimes they don't listen. Like you're pouring your heart out to them about some serious things.
Right.
And they're not even listening. They're like, oh, really? Oh, well, I had a flat tire today.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, their flat tire is the equivalent
Correct.
to you really bearing your soul.
Right.
They'll all of a sudden make it about them.
Right.
And that happens often. I've seen
does.
it. I've experienced it. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm actually expressing to you, and I just want you to listen, and then we can talk about it after I express it.
Right.
I'm sorry that you got the flat tire, but that does not match up to
And
this bleeding arm.
Right. And for people like myself who, when that happens, we're like, all right, well, now it's time to talk about that person.
Yeah,
and they're
how
not
was the flat tire?
right. And we're not going to stand up for ourselves and be like, hey, wait a minute, I get it, but like I'm going through a lot more stuff than just your flat tire. And so I've had many instances where that's happened, and I'm just like, all right, well, let's talk about what you're going through.
So what do you do about it? Do you say, let's hear about the flat tire, or do you say, wait, we can get to your flat tire in a minute, but I've actually had to say to people sometimes, are you listening to what I'm saying, and do you really care about what I'm saying? Because then we're wasting time here.
Right. So going back to a sense of something we talked about earlier of like, not toxic people, but like realizing things, it's a little bit of that.
Some editing you got to do.
9 times out of 10, I will just listen to what the other person's saying, and now I'm making a mental check of like, no, can't trust this person. I can't go to this person anymore.
I'm not gonna
do anything.
Off the Christmas card list.
Yeah, or they could be on the Christmas card list. I'm just because, and that's what this is what I've learned is I go to certain people for certain things. Mm-hmm. In that case, I know not to go to this person to talk about my troubles, because all they want to do is talk about themselves.
Yes.
And so now that I've made that mental note, and I'll be like, okay, I mean, like that. Thank you for taking the time to listen to a little bit that I had to complain about, and now I'm going to listen to what you're saying, and okay. And now I've made a mental note not to talk with you about that anymore.
Right.
And now I know where our relationship is. Like it's just general back and forth information, and then just being there for you when that person needs something.
Right. Exactly. Did you come to a point where you're like, gee, I'm always there for everybody else, but I need people to be here for me too? Yeah,
there was a point. I mean, I do go to a therapist. I don't go every week. I don't go every month. And she has this understanding because she knows who I am. If like we have a session and then I have to go away and I have to process everything we talked about.
Yes.
Because
right.
even by the end of the session, like I kind of have this glazed over look on my face.
Because it's all coming at you.
It's all coming at me.
And then later when you're alone hiking the mountain, you can sort of say, okay, let me just think about those things. And she said this or said that or...
Right, because I also do take car drives too. I'll take long car drives on like backcountry roads.
Some music on in the back.
Music on.
That's the best.
And
it's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, I love doing it. And that's when I process all the information. And the interesting part is, from what we've talked about, I can then be like, oh, this is how I am. This is what I did in my youth to make me think this way. And now I'm going to not do that anymore. And so I actually learn a lot more after like one session, and then couple months later, if like something's bothering me, I'll go back and I'll talk to her again.
That's very good, yeah. And then coaches are coached. Right. I mean, everybody,
exactly.
We all need, sometimes to talk things out or work it through. And what that does is it means you really invest in and value yourself to do that.
Yes.
And again, it also makes you more relatable to your clients
Yes.
who may need some assistance in that way, which I
Right.
think is really fantastic.
It's hard becoming very self-aware of yourself. I'm very self-aware of myself, and it's hard to do self-growth, because after a certain age, some people don't want to go back and delve into what's happened in the past, because it's hard. It's, it was maybe been a hard time, depressing time, whatever it may be, but sometimes going back into the past heals us now and makes us a stronger person. And,
Yes.
it's going back and doing that.
The other thing, too, you talked about is box thinking.
Yes.
And oftentimes, we can put ourselves in a box, but the world can also put us in a box.
Correct.
So they may say, you may say, well, I've gone through a lot of different things. I've gone through lots of transition in my life for the positive. But the people who've known you the longest say, you're still always going to be that little girl, Jill.
Right.
You're always Jill, that Jill that we want, the Jill that we think, the Jill that we know.
Sure.
Almost not giving you the slack or the permission to evolve as a person and grow and change and have boundaries and look out for you. And sometimes that boxes you in.
Right, especially because it was that box thinking. I'm luckily now that my family is very, open to my accepting of the change that I've been going through, and they're very supportive, and we talk about it all the time. And so I'm very lucky to have a family who's very supportive that way. But yes, the box thinking of, when I was a kid, basically, and what we still do to this day at times is that, if this isn't the way this is supposed to be, then there's no other option for it. And there's the tree thinking of oh, okay, well, something didn't work here. Well, let me go to the next branch and maybe I'll figure out something here. Okay, then I'm going to take what from those two branches and I'm going to go here. And then that just creates a stronger tree or stronger root, whatever it may be. And again, it's that box thinking of, well, as we're told as kids, well, if this one thing doesn't work, then nothing's ever going to work. And it's well, that's not true, because there's multiple ways to do things, which leads me back again to my company, because I teach you multiple ways. I teach people multiple ways to do exercises. I teach multiple ways to work on their nutrition. I teach people multiple ways to find a mindset that works for them, a positive mindset, and how they can get there. Because again, everybody's different on how they get there.
What about people who go in the opposite direction, where they overdo it? Like, for example, because of societal pressures, peer pressure, social media, everything else, they will take nutrition in a different direction, and sometimes even exercise in a different direction, where they're almost overdoing it. They're not eating anything. They're drinking water and having, nuts, and that's it all day, and they're not getting any balanced nutrition because they got to be super thin. They got to be model-esque. They got to be perfect.
Yep.
And they'll kill their body with overindulgence, even beyond where the body doesn't even want that, just because they have to fit in, or they have to. It's the only way that they can do it is to not eat. So there's that other side of.
I overate and I underate. Maybe I underate and I overexercised for a long period of time, and it wasn't until I went to a sports nutritionist. Right.
You said, wait, there's a different way to do this.
Right, and I say sports nutritionist because I went to a regular nutritionist who didn't understand why when I worked out so much, and she couldn't really help me. So I had to go to a sports nutritionist who understands that I worked out a lot, and he's like, no, you have to back down on how much you're working out, and you need to eat more because you need to fuel your body. And that's when I really started there, understanding more about how, how I was eating. The hard part with that became because I'm obsessed. I have to be perfect. Okay. So if you count your macros, which is your proteins, your fats, and your carbohydrates, you have certain numbers you have to meet every day. Well, if I didn't meet those numbers specifically every day, for me, I'd be like, that's it. I'm fat. I'm never going to gain the weight. Done. I'm just going to binge eat, and then I binge eat. I became addicted to suppositories. You know how people throw up?
Yeah.
I came out the other way.
It's almost like a cleansing.
I'd eat a very large meal, and then I'd take a suppository and go to the bathroom, thinking it cleared out my meal, even though it really didn't, because we don't process food that quickly. But mentally, it made me feel better, and I stopped that eventually. But it was
Some people do laxatives. They do all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I became addicted to numbers, and I had to stop counting macros. And when I stopped counting macros and just kind of relaxed and ate how my body wanted me to eat that day, and again, that's what I teach my clients. On days you're doing a lot of cardio, you know, you need a little bit more carbohydrates to fuel the body. On days you're just lifting, maybe a little bit more protein, it repairs the muscle, fuels the body, and all that stuff.
One of the things I know is really important that you've expressed, which I think is really terrific for your clients, is getting in touch with your feelings.
Yes.
That's one of the big things that people suppress, is dealing with their feelings. And that can range your feelings throughout one day with
Yes.
the 80,000 thoughts we have per day.
Yep.
Your feelings will change based on, sometimes your feelings will change not just on what's going on and what people are saying and what's happening around you, but even based on what's happening internally to your
Right.
physical body.
Right.
Certain things, if you're not getting the right nutrition or the right physical fitness, can make you very exhausted,
Yep.
Unmotivated,
Yep.
edgy,
Yes.
irritable,
Yeah.
and people will assume that's you because you're being an idiot,
Right.
when actually there's the physical things that are happening that are sort of triggering that reaction. It's and getting in touch with the feelings. If you're feeling scared, fearful, frustrated,
Right.
angry, whatever, get in touch with those feelings and work with them. Feelings are okay.
Yes, embrace your feelings. And that's a very hard thing to do, is embrace our feelings. Because again, you know, now maybe people will say embrace your feelings a little bit more, but when I grew up, we don't talk about our feelings.
It was more
you know,
of
the older
stiff
generation,
upper lip.
yeah, we
Come
don't
on,
talk about our
we
feelings.
got through the war and the
Right.
depression, and we walked 30 miles
Just
to
suck it up,
school,
deal with it, and
come
off you
on,
go,
it's,
you know. And
or take a pill for it.
Or take a pill for it, exactly, or take a pill for it. And so my whole thing is, it's okay to have feelings, right? And it goes back to what I was saying too about that person who, when you're talking to them, then all of a sudden becomes about them, right? And
Yes.
right now you feel like
I
the
still have
burden
a couple
again.
of people that I know that do that.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, it's hard, and
That
it's
flat tire thing.
It's embracing our feelings, and it's an uncomfortable thing to do, because we're taught not to.
Because we're afraid they're going to get hurt too.
We're going to making ourselves vulnerable, but also showing a sign of weakness too.
Yeah,
Because
right.
if we show our feelings, then you're weak. Well, no, having feelings makes us strong.
It's actually
Having feelings,
it's a strength.
right,
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
us who we are. And so it's, you know, that frustration of maybe being in the gym and not being able to lift the amount of weight they wanted to do. And it's like, well, no, embrace that frustration right now. Take that and work with it with the step back that we're going to do with the weight, the food. You know, that frustration of, man, I just can't seem to, you know, get past eating this junk food, or I can't seem to just get, and it's like, okay, let's take it a step at a time. Okay, maybe we try to do something too fast. Let's break it down to little things to get rid of first, or to back down on eating, because it's best sometimes, you know, when we're trying to get rid of a food out of our diet, it's hard to cut it out completely. There's some people who can totally do it, and that's amazing, but a lot of people have a hard time cutting the food out completely.
Yeah.
And it's backing the food down to where you're just not eating it all the time. And our body, especially with sugar, goes through a withdrawal after we take out the sugar for extended, because it feels
absolutely.
like you're like tired. People who take caffeine out of their diet.
Yes.
And the funny part is, people who take caffeine out of their diet then feel like, well, I don't really need it, because like I have a lot more energy in the afternoon. But when you take that caffeine and then you get a little tired and be like, oh, I need more caffeine, to the point of like, it becomes you need it, right? And it's a crutch in a way. But as soon as you get rid of all of it, you realize, oh man, I feel so much better without the caffeine. I feel so much better without a lot of sugar that I was eating. So
Caffeine for me really doesn't do the trick either. It used to. It doesn't. I've become like resistant to it. It doesn't give you that boost. You know, some people with their 2 cups of coffee or something and they're flying high. It doesn't do that for me anymore.
I never drank coffee. I like the smell of coffee. I've never drank coffee. I do drink black tea occasionally. But I can't, because I used to take pre-workout. The pre-workout which is right before you work out, gives you a little bit of caffeine to get you through the workout. The one I was taking, you know, was more of a natural one, so it didn't have too much caffeine in it. But what I was finding between the black tea and the pre-workout, I was having too much caffeine, to the point where I was like, why am I so angry all the time? It was making me irrationally angry.
Right.
And so I completely cut all of it out. Again, I do drink black tea occasionally, but not that much. I drink mostly water, and it's,
What about green tea?
I
keep hearing so many good things
green
about
tea is great, but again, it goes back to green tea is great, but for me personally, my body can't process it.
Right, yeah. So it's being in touch with what your body gives off signals.
It does.
It gives off little
and
signals.
it's listening to those signals, and sometimes we don't want to listen to those signals because we want to have what we want to have.
You'll have 4 slices of pizza and then feel not so good and wonder why. Because it's pizza. Pizza makes everybody feel good.
Exactly.
Not necessarily for everybody.
Not necessarily for everybody.
Ice cream or whatever it is.
Right. You know, with gluten intolerances and all that stuff.
Allergies.
And it makes people feel sluggish and like, don't have white bread, have whole grain bread and all that stuff. Well, the funny part is wheat bread upsets my stomach more than like a white bread does. So the healthier version sometimes of things is more, inhibits my body more than like something that isn't. So I have to find a balance between everything.
I used to get that. I remember 17 years old, 18, 17. I liked Wheaties.
Okay.
Because even Breakfast of Champions.
Yeah.
And it just tasted good,
right.
Wheaties. And I would have like 2 bowls, and then like 2 hours later,
yeah.
we're like, oh, and I cut that out.
Yep.
A few years later, cut it out. And that went away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just the wheat or too much. It's all wheat. It's just all.
It is. It's too much, and it's going back again to listening to your body, and that's what I do with my clients. I force them to listen to their body and what nutrition's doing for them, what their exercise is doing to them, and mentally what it's doing to them too.
We talked about being in touch with your feelings. Another thing I know that you're very big on is that it's okay to share your feelings.
Right.
As sharing and expressing it is really important too, right?
Right, because I internalized everything. So when I never expressed and shared my feelings, and then when I found the right people, friends that I can express it to, that's when I realized it was okay to be. And sometimes I will text a friend of mine and be like, I'm really sorry for the very long paragraph that you were about to get. And so I will like do this very long paragraph, and she'll be like, and she's very good about writing back and be like, yeah, dude. And I found a friend who will respond to what I'm going through, right? And in the proper way that you want the friend to respond to, right? Because you can message with people or talk with people, and you think they're going to respond the way you want them to. And again, it's like, oh, they're trying to fix your problem. Well, sometimes I just want someone to listen to.
Right, exactly.
To listen to me. And so talking with, it's being that person for my clients, but also helping them find other people in their lives that they can turn to talk to as well, that will be there and listen to them, as opposed to just trying to solve their problem and trying to fix everything, or bringing up their own problems and like making that person feel bad. So again, it's finding that small group of people that you can turn to. And it's interesting because everyone's like, as a kid, you're like, oh, you have to have all these friends, right? But really, when it comes down to it all, your inner circle is very small.
Don't you love when you get a response if you leave a lengthy text because you're explaining everything and you're sharing all of this and maybe helping them do something to make it easy so you don't have to keep repeating yourself. A long text or a long email, and you figure, like you say, they're going to respond in a certain way that's also descriptive.
Right.
And I had this happen. I was a colleague, actually. Who had asked a question, and I responded with spelling it all out and giving them all the choices and all the options. And their response was the letter K.
Yeah.
K. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't even get the O with the K?
No,
I don't get OK, I just get a K?
You just get a K.
I just gave you the Gettysburg Address,
right.
and I get a K?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's interesting.
It is interesting. It's very interesting.
So I've shortened because I know I'm just going to get a K
back. Right. Yeah, again, it goes back to finding your tribe and finding the people and being okay with losing people as friends. And that's the hard part.
You have to sort of, the other thing is you believe it's right to live in your feelings too.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
If I'm feeling happy, it's embracing the happiness, because I didn't know if I was happy when I was in my depressed state, anxiety state. If I was happy, I would always be waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so then I would become unhappy again, because it's like, well, this happiness can't last. Yeah. And so it's going back to connecting the mind to what we're feeling, okay? Embracing and understanding what happiness feels like, because get used to that feeling, because that's the feeling you want. right? I don't want that anxiety when I feel that way again, I'm like, no. Like if I feel myself spiraling a little bit, I tell myself to stop. Like, let's go back to the happy feelings. Let's see what that feels like. And if I am anxious about something, I stop and I'm like, okay, where is this coming from? Instead of just internalizing and sitting on it and spiraling down a path, I'm like, no, we're going to stop this. We're going to take it out right now by its knees. We're going to figure out why we're feeling this way, and then we trace it all back, and then the happiness comes back. And it's interesting. Someone said to me recently, they're like, well, are you happy? Right, because of everything I've gone through. And I say I'm at peace. I'm at peace with myself. You know, yes, there's days that I'm extremely happy, and that's where, you know, I choose to live. But I do have days when I have bad days, and I embrace those. Right, I embrace those sad days, those frustrating days. But I don't go back to where I was with that anxiety and that depression, and then I just live in peace. And I'm at peace with myself, and that's what I say. Because I think people feel like, oh, if you want to be, you know, if you're trying to be happy, then that's the state you have to live in all the time. No, you don't. No. Trying to force yourself to be happy all the time, that's exhausting. Yeah,
because then you spend money on expensive cars and all these things, think that's going to make you happy. That's temporary.
Right.
One of the biggest things is practicing gratitude.
Exactly.
And manifesting these things in your life. Tell us about the importance of that.
Yeah, and it's people like, oh, manifesting, it's hooey. It's really not. It works for me, I can tell you that right now. And gratitude every day. And manifesting is living like you already have something, and saying it in gratification like you already have it. And then the universe will bring it to you. Sometimes it brings things faster to you. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time because it has to align you correctly with where you need to be. And I'm a big believer in manifesting and doing gratitude and saying that I have what I have, you know, having what I want in the moment, in the present, like I already have it. And it's important to do that because it also gives us a more positive energy. It makes us feel better. Like, yes, I do have it, and yes, you know, I am working towards things to get me there. And all of a sudden, as soon as you start saying these gratitudes and saying these manifestations, you'll find, oh my gosh, like, look at that. And it's little things, but it's that little thing that's going to take you and then keep moving and keep moving and keep moving, and it's
keeping
amazing.
That train on the track.
Keeping that train on the track, yeah.
The other thing too is there's negative self-talk, which sort of ties into a lot of what we're talking about right now. But that constant negative self-talk, that voice that says, you can't, you shouldn't, you won't, don't bother, drop it, forget about it. Right. That can really take you down the wrong road too.
It can. And it, again, because I've done a whole lot of it. Did a lot of it and it became ingrained in me. And that's what we try to prevent, is having that negative self-talk ingrained in you, because the more you say it, the more it becomes ingrained. So it's trying to have that positive self-talk ingrained in you, because that's the way, the hope is that we want people to go, is my clients to go too, is they have the positive self-talk. And having negative self-talk talks you out of things too, because you're like, oh, I'm really excited about this idea, and then all of a sudden, like, you come up with, you're still kind of excited, but then you come with a reason why you shouldn't do it. Right? And then it expands and expands to the point of where, like, you just don't do it because you talk yourself out of it, because there's a fear that comes along. And there's plenty of times when there was a fear that came along with me of like, oh man, if I do this, what's going to happen? Like, I don't know how to be happy. I don't know how to take that happiness and enjoy what this is going to be like. Or even to a point, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this happiness because of all the negative talk I did to myself of like, I don't deserve good things, I'm worthless, I'm this. And again, that's just me taking what I think people's expectations are of me, or situations that I went through, and putting it on myself and telling myself that I'm worthless.
Would you say you're an overthinker?
Oh, yeah.
You said that fast. Yeah, you're always deducing, analyzing, reviewing, and overthinking, which in certain areas can be very beneficial and can be really productive. But sometimes, I guess when you're over-analyzing things, it can sort of get in the way, like especially with happiness. If the mission is, how am I going to create the happiness? How am I going to maintain the happiness? And if you're thinking about having to do it, then it doesn't come naturally. Because you can be happy without having to analyze, well, is this what happy is? Is this what happy is supposed to be? Am I meeting the expectation of what happy is as the world defines it, as opposed to just letting it ride? Have you learned, well, it sounds like you actually have you learned ways to just let happy happen?
Yeah, I've had to control my overthinking because I still do it, but I tried again. How I made my dyslexia work for me, I'm now having to make my overthinking work for me and not let it deter me from doing things like I'd stated earlier about being excited about a project, overthinking it too much, and then it goes away. Right? Now it's being like, okay, hold on, let's take a step back. Yes, we're nervous about this, but we'll be okay. And then, we'll move forward to the next point of whatever it is.
You're redirecting the energy to where the overthinking might be good.
In a positive way.
Right,
instead of taking me down the negative path.
Right, which is important.
Yeah, because I feel like, I know a lot of overthinkers, you, again, overthink the situation to where you talk yourself out of it instead of embracing a situation.
We talked about people sometimes not really eating when they're trying to quote-unquote diet, and like we know 98% of diets fail. And then there's the New Year's Eve resolutions, which nobody really ever meets, and all these, well, I'm going to do it with this, or I have a wedding to go to, so I'm going to, it's nice to want to do it for the wedding, but you want to really do it for yourself, lose weight or get fit or what have you. Not just so you look good to everybody at the wedding, but it's something you're doing for yourself. A lot of people sometimes get very obsessive with the weight numbers. Oh, I lost an ounce, I'm only losing this and losing that, I'm going to give up. Tell us about that obsession and dealing with the obsession of the counting calories, the numbers game.
The numbers game, So like I mentioned a little bit earlier about how I got addicted to counting my macros, right? Which are the protein, the fats, and the carbohydrates. I also became addicted to hitting 10,000 steps, right? I don't wear a watch anymore, but I used to wear a Garmin watch. And every time it hit 10,000 steps, my wrist would buzz and I'd be like, it's sad, but like, that was like a feeling of joy. I was like, I accomplished something today, even though I may have accomplished 10,000 amazing things. To me, that little 10,000 steps was the most amazing thing. I don't use a scale anymore, and I tell my clients not to use a scale. I call the scale the devil because, one, not every scale is accurate, okay? Especially the ones that do body comp and all that. Like, you have to be hydrated to a certain point. You have to be wearing whatever. And so what would happen specifically with me when I was on a scale, I see the number and the number would go up, and I'd be like, but I get upset and then I overeat, and it's like, well, no, you're building muscle by lifting weights. So yes, that number is going to go up. How are your clothes feeling? And eventually I got rid of the scale and it was like, well, how do my clothes fit? Well, my clothes fit me loosely. I could tell, weirdly enough, if I put my hand on a certain point of like my leg, like, okay, maybe I'm a little, maybe gained a little bit here, I've lost a little bit here, like I could tell that way.
Clothes are a good indicator.
Clothes are an amazing indicator.
Some people have 2 sets of clothes.
Yeah.
The summer fit and then the winter wide.
Wide, yeah. And so that's what it is. And so I tell my clients, don't rely on the scale because that number is going to go up and down. How do your clothes feel? How do you feel? And it's a lot of that.
The up and down numbers will make your moods go up and down too.
And it makes you depressed because if you feel like you're not hitting where you want to be or the number looks like it's going up, then that person becomes depressed and they binge eat and it's bad.
So decreasing the overthinking and not, being so tough on yourself with the scales and all. The other thing too is dwelling on the past.
Yeah.
Which a lot of us do.
Right.
Tell us about not doing that. Learning from it.
Right.
Appreciating it.
Right.
But not living in it and dwelling on it constantly.
Yes. It's hard because I did that a lot. I dwelled on the past and I would think, okay, how could I have done this better? How could I do? And all that does is make you more frustrated and angry. And it doesn't move us forward. And we want, in order to move forward, we need to release the past, accept the past for what it was. Be like, yes, that's what it is, and now we're going to move forward from here. You can reference the past, but don't get fixated on it because it could take us down a dark path, and it's hard to get out of once you start going down the dark path of getting fixated on things that used to happen. Now it's just, okay, I accept that for what it is. I've learned these lessons from it. I'm going to take those. It's made me stronger, and now I'm going to move forward, and it's letting go of the past, which is very hard to do sometimes.
Setting goals, too. You say that we're like a GPS.
Yep.
Setting goals is important. Tell us about how we do that.
So I always reference life as a GPS, right? We want to get to our end goal, and we want to get there as quickly as we possibly can, right? So we tell our GPS, get us there as quickly as we can. But all of a sudden, as we go, well, now there's a detour. Well, now you have to get off the exit. And now you have to drive a little bit through these roads, and then all of a sudden, those backcountry roads, that's where we learn a lot. That can help us move forward towards our goal and make our goal even better, right? And what that teaches is not to have one large goal. You could have the large goal, but make smaller goals for yourself to get there, and embrace the change that comes along with maybe that goal not going the way you thought it was going to go, and embracing the change of being like, you know what, this has made my goal better. And then taking that and moving forward to whatever small goal you have next. And then realizing by the time we get to our end goal, whenever it may be, that now our end goal has changed, because now of all the little goals that we've made for ourselves along the way. And now our bigger goal has changed for the better, because we've become a better person along the path.
Why do you love doing what you do so much?
Because I came from a place that was, a negative, bad place mentally, physically even, and I want to help people. The joy of seeing other people become better, become balanced, become more healthy. Better is not really a great word for it, but being healthy and being balanced, and being happy with who they are. And I think that's a big part of it too, is being happy with somebody, being happy with a person with who they are on the inside. Because again, coming from that state of myself, living that life, and I want to help other people get to that point. And that's what I do, what I want to do, because I want to show people that it's not over. You can, change your life for the better. It's going to take time, but you can do it. And that's why I do what I do, because I love helping people. So really quick, I want to touch on biodysmorphia and what that is. And it's people, for myself, I'll tell my story about how when I lost the weight, as I started to lose weight, I still looked at myself that I was still that heavier person, right? And that's a hard thing for people to, when they initially lose weight, they may still look at themselves of that heavier person, to where they can't look at themselves in the mirror without seeing the heavier person. And then they start picking themselves apart. And I had watched a movie a long time ago when I was a kid about where this woman wanted to join sorority, and they made her walk down like a runway, and like the other sorority sisters would pick her apart and like take a red Sharpie, like circle the imperfections. And that's what I started to do, was take my imperfections, and I was circling like my body fat and where was this and where was that. And I couldn't stand in front of a mirror for a very long time, because like I would just pick myself apart. And so it's important to, embrace the change and embrace how our bodies change. And it's okay to look in the mirror and embrace who we are now, what we look like. And it's very important for that.
Very important. That movie wasn't Carrie, was it?
It wasn't Carrie, no.
Remember when
she didn't end up in Blood Up In.
Make fun of her.
Yeah.
That's the way not to react.
That's correct.
If you feel like that, Jill can help you.
Exactly.
Before you get to that point.
Exactly.
It's great information, Jill.
Yeah.
Jill, this was absolutely fantastic, eye-opening, inspiring, and fascinating. Thanks so much for coming to the television studio and being so authentic and open and sharing all these incredible stories about your life, but also about how you can help others who might really be struggling and at a point in their lives where they're stuck.
Right.
And where exercise, nutrition, but also just understanding the mind-body connection can come into play in a very positive way.
Yes, and I thank you, Jim. I appreciate you having me on the show and having me here so we could talk more about this. It's an important issue, especially nowadays, and people coming, like I said, out of COVID and all that stuff, and their body has changed because they weren't able to go to gyms, and mental health and all that stuff. And it's very important, and I'm here to help those people who need it, and to give them that healthier mindset, a more positive body image, and just a balanced, healthy, balanced life.
Jill, it was a true pleasure, and I appreciate it and hope to hear more from you.
Thank you, Jim.
Continued success.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
As you can see, Jill loves what she does. She loves helping people achieve their health and wellness goals, and she could help you. If you'd like to learn more, visit this website, truefitbalance.com. For Close-Up Television and Radio, I'm Jim Masters. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.